The fires burned across 3 star systems now. Ambassador Kextu stood before the massive viewing screen in the Zentari Council chamber, watching another world die. The planet Velmara had been green and beautiful just 2 days ago. Now it glowed orange and red as the Vex car swarm consumed everything that lived. Kextu, 4 arms trembled as he adjusted his ceremonial robes. His blue skin had turned pale gray with stress. Behind him, the other council members whispered in their native tongue. The words were always the same: fear, desperation, and now, the unthinkable suggestion that kept coming up in every meeting. "We must contact the humans," said Counselor Zexinen for the 3rd time that day. Her voice was quiet but firm. "They are our only option left." Kexthul turned away from the burning world on the screen. "The humans are savages," he said. "They come from a death world. Their planet is covered in poison oceans and deadly storms. They fight wars over resources instead of negotiating like civilized beings. And yet they survive that world," Zexinen replied. "Perhaps savagery is what we need now." The Vex car had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of Zentari space. At first, they seemed like any other species making contact. The Zentari had sent diplomatic ships with gifts in translation. Equipment. They had followed all the proper protocols for first contact. The Vex car had eaten the diplomats. Ships, crews, and all. Then they had begun to spread. World after world fell to their endless hunger. The Vex car were not like other species. They were a hive mind, billions of creatures working as one. They consumed all organic matter and used it to make more of themselves. They turned entire planets into breeding grounds for their swarm. The Zentari military had tried to stop them. Their sleek ships with energy shields and particle beams had seemed powerful. Against the Vex car, they were nothing. The swarm simply overwhelmed them with numbers. For every Vex car ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. Other species in the Galactic Council had tried to help. The Coven sent their battle cruisers. The Nethys contributed their advanced weapons. All had failed. The Vex car adapted to every tactic, learned from every battle. They were consuming the galaxy one system at a time. The humans have only been in the Council for 5 years, Kexthul said. They barely have space travel. What could they possibly do that our advanced fleets could not? I do not know, Zexinen admitted. But we are running out of options and worlds. Kexthul looked back at the screen. Velmara was almost completely orange now. Soon it would be black and empty, another dead rock in space. The Vex car would move on to the next world, and the next, until there was nothing left. The humans had been a controversial addition to the Galactic Council. Most species discovered space travel gradually. They developed slowly, learning wisdom before they gained power. Humans had gone from primitive tribes to interstellar flight in just a few thousand years. It was unnatural, dangerous. When human ships first appeared at Council space, they had been crude things. Metal hulls instead of grown bioships. Chemical rockets instead of gravity drives. Nuclear weapons instead of clean energy beams. Everything about them screamed of a violent, primitive species, but they had been intelligent, and they had followed the laws. So the Council had granted them membership, though many species had voted against it. The humans were given a small territory in the Outer Rim and told to stay there. Most Council members preferred to pretend they did not exist. Now they might be the galaxy's last hope. Very well, Kexthul said finally. Prepare a message to the human territories, but make it clear this is a minor request. We need some assistance with a border dispute, nothing more. Zexinen looked confused. But Ambassador, this is not a border dispute. This is total war. Shouldn't we tell them the true situation? Absolutely not, Kexthul said firmly. If we tell them the real scope of the threat, they might panic. Or worse, they might decide we are already lost and refuse to help at all. Humans are unpredictable. We must be careful how we approach them. The message was composed according to proper diplomatic protocols. It spoke of minor territorial difficulties and assistance from available human forces. It used phrases like, if convenient, and at your earliest opportunity. It was polite, formal, and completely failed to convey that the Zentari faced complete extinction. The message was sent to the human colony of New Austin, the closest human settlement to Zentari space. Kex-Thul expected it would take days for a response. Humans were known to be slow in their decision-making. Their government was divided among many leaders who had to debate everything. The response came back in 2 hours. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the cruiser Liberty, reading the Zentari message for the 5th time. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and his brown eyes were sharp with intelligence. He had been fighting pirates and raiders on the Rim for 10 years. He knew what desperate people sounded like. Lieutenant Rodriguez, he called to his communications officer. Get me Admiral Carter on priority channel. Amy Rodriguez was young for her rank, but she was the best-come officer in the fleet. Her fingers flew over her console as she opened. A direct line to Earth Command. Channel open, sir. Admiral, Morrison said when Lisa Carter's face appeared on screen. We've got a problem. The Zentari are asking for help. Carter raised an eyebrow. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The Zentari, since when do they acknowledge we exist? Since right now, Morrison said. They're trying to make it sound small, but I've seen this before. When someone uses this much diplomatic language to ask for help, they're in serious trouble. He forwarded the message to Carter. She read it quickly, her expression growing more serious with each line. Minor territorial difficulties, she read aloud. Available human forces. If convenient. She looked up at Morrison. Jake, this sounds like they're about to be wiped out, and they're too proud to say it. That's what I'm thinking, Morrison agreed. Should I take the Liberty and a few escorts to check it out? Negative, Carter said. If they're desperate enough to call us, it's bigger than a small force can handle. I'm activating Protocol 7. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Protocol 7 was total fleet mobilization. It meant treating any threat as an existential danger to humanity itself. Admiral, are you sure? The message doesn't sound that serious. Jake, I've been dealing with alien politics for 15 years, Carter said. When a species that thinks we're barbarians asks for our help, it means they've tried everything else and failed. When they try to make it sound small, it means it's huge. Get back to base. We're going to show them what human help actually looks like. The channel closed. Morrison sat back in his chair, thinking about what he had just set in motion. The other species in the galaxy saw humans as violent primitives from a dangerous world. They didn't understand that humans had learned something important on their harsh planet. When someone asked for help, you gave them everything you had, because in the dark between the stars, sometimes everything was what it took to survive. On Zentari Prime, Ambassador Kex-Thul waited for a response to his message. He expected perhaps a single human ship in a few days, maybe 2 if they were feeling generous. He had no idea that across human space, every ship, every weapon, and every soldier was being mobilized. The humans were coming. All of them. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the war room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth. The massive chamber buzzed with activity as officers ran between stations, their voices mixing into a constant hum of urgent communication. Holographic displays showed star maps, fleet positions, and supply lines stretching across human space. Report, Carter said as she approached the central planning table where General Rick Torres was studying deployment charts. Torres was a big man with scarred hands and intelligent eyes. He had fought in the colony wars and knew what real warfare looked like. We've got 843 ships ready to move, he said. That's everything we can pull from patrol duty, training missions, and home defense. What about the experimental ships? Carter asked. The Thunderstrike and her sister ships are ready. The new stealth destroyers too. And the Biological Warfare Division has been working overtime. Torres pointed to a section of the display showing ships marked with red warning symbols. Dr. Price's people have been busy. Dr. Helen Price looked up from her workstation across the room. She was a thin woman with short brown hair and tired eyes. She had been working for 36 hours straight, but she showed no signs of slowing down. Admiral, we've made significant progress on the Vex car samples we collected from the border. Incidents. Carter walked over to Price's station. The doctor's screen showed complex biological diagrams and chemical formulas. What did you find? The Vex car are fascinating from a scientific perspective, Price said. They're a true hive mind, but their biology has a weakness. They share genetic material constantly through their connection. If we can introduce the right kind of virus into their system, it will spread to the entire swarm. What kind of virus? Carter asked. Price's smile was cold. The kind that turns their own digestive systems against them. They consume organic matter to reproduce. This virus will make that process toxic to them instead of beneficial. Torres whistled low. That's brutal, Doc. They're trying to eat the galaxy, Price replied without emotion. I'm just making sure they choke on it. Commander Dan Walsh approached the group with a datapad in his hands. He was the intelligence officer responsible for monitoring alien communications. Admiral, we're picking up interesting chatter from the other Council species. They're detecting our fleet movements. What are they saying? Carter asked. They think our sensors are malfunctioning, Walsh said with a grin. The Coven monitoring station reported 800 ship signatures, moving from Earth toward Centauri. Space. Their command told them to recalibrate their equipment, because no species could mobilize that many ships that quickly. General Torres laughed. They really don't understand us, do they? No, they don't, Carter agreed. They think we're primitive because we use kinetic weapons and nuclear explosives. They don't realize those work better than their fancy energy beams in most situations. The holographic display updated to show the first wave of human ships reaching the staging area near Centauri space. Captain Morrison's advance group had been joined by 50 more vessels, with hundreds more on the way. The Centauri are about to get a very big surprise, Walsh said, on the alien monitoring station orbiting Corvin Prime. Sensor operator Nixtel stared at his readings in confusion. The display showed more human ships than should exist. According to Council records, humans had perhaps 100 vessels total. But his sensors were detecting over 800 distinct signatures. Supervisor, he called to his commanding officer. The human readings are still showing impossible numbers. Supervisor Kevin walked over to Nixtel's station. He was an old Coven with silver scales and many years of experience. Show me. The display lit up with hundreds of red dots moving in formation towards Centauri space. Each dot represented a human warship. The formation was precise and disciplined, nothing like the chaotic movements the Corvin expected from a primitive species. This cannot be correct, Kevin said. Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array. I have run diagnostics 4 times, Nixtel replied. The sensors are working perfectly. The humans have mobilized their entire military. Kevin studied the display more carefully. The human ships were moving in formations that suggested advanced tactical thinking. They had scout groups, main battle lines, support vessels, and what appeared to be specialized attack craft. It looked like a real navy, not the collection of armed traders most species assumed humans possessed. Contact the Galactic Council, Kevin said quietly. They need to know about this. Dr. Helen Price's laboratory was located in the lower levels of the Colorado facility. She worked with a team of 12 specialists, all focused on understanding the biological structure of the Vexcar. The samples they had came from border skirmishes, where human ships had managed to recover pieces of destroyed Vexcar vessels. The virus is ready for field testing, Price announced to her team. We've created 3 different variants to ensure maximum effectiveness. Her assistant, Dr. Carl Watson, looked up from his workstation. Are you sure about this, Helen? Once we release this into their population, there's no way to control it. That's the point, Price replied. The Vexcar don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They consume everything in their path. The only way to stop them is to eliminate them completely. Watson nodded reluctantly. He understood the logic, but it still felt wrong to create something designed to wipe out an entire species. What about the ethical implications? The ethical implication is that if we don't stop them, they'll eat every living thing in the galaxy, Price said firmly. Sometimes survival requires making hard choices. The virus they had created was elegant in its simplicity. It would integrate into the Vexcar's shared biological network and then corrupt their ability to process organic matter. Instead of gaining energy from consumption, they would slowly poison themselves. The process would take days, giving the virus time to spread through their entire population. Load the virus into deployment canisters, Price ordered. The fleet will need them when they reach the combat zone. Meanwhile, at the Zentari capital, Ambassador Kex Thul was growing increasingly worried. It had been 3 days since they sent their message to the humans, and they had received no response. Perhaps the humans had decided the situation was too dangerous. Perhaps they were afraid of the Vexcar. Any word from the human territories? He asked his aide. Nothing, Ambassador, the aide replied. But our deep space sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures near the border. Kex Thul felt a flutter. Of hope, human ships? We believe so, but the readings are confusing. The computer estimates 12 vessels, but the energy output suggests much more. Could there be more ships than the sensors are detecting? The aide looked uncomfortable. It's possible, but humans use very basic technology. Their ships should be easy to detect and count. What the Zentari didn't know was that human stealth technology was far more advanced than anyone realized. The ships they were detecting were just the ones the humans wanted them to see. The main fleet was still hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Admiral Carter reviewed the final deployment plans in her command center. The operation was larger than anything humanity had attempted since the colony wars. Every available ship, every trained crew, every weapon system was being committed to the fight. Are you sure about this, Lisa? General Torres asked quietly. We're committing everything. If this goes wrong, Earth will be defenseless. Carter looked at the tactical display showing the Vexcar advance. They had consumed 4 more worlds while the human fleet was mobilizing. Soon they would reach the core Zentari systems. After that, they would spread throughout the galaxy like a plague. If we don't stop them here, Earth won't matter, she said. This is what we've been preparing for since we joined the Council. The moment when someone needed our help and we had to decide what kind of species we want to be. And what kind is that? Torres asked. The kind that shows up, Carter replied. All of us. The final elements of the human fleet were moving into position. In a few hours, they would drop out of hyperspace in Zentari territory. The aliens were expecting maybe a dozen ships to help with what they thought was a border dispute. They were about to discover what happened when you asked humans for help and really meant it. The first shockwave hit Ambassador Kex Thul when his aide burst into the council chamber without announcement. The young Zentari's face was pale blue with terror, and his forearm shook as he held a datapad. Ambassador, the aide gasped. The humans, they're here. Kex Thul looked up from the casualty reports he had been reading. Another world had gone dark 3 hours ago. How many ships? He asked. 12, as our sensors indicated, but ... double quotes. The aide struggled to find words. But they're massive, Ambassador. Each one is larger than our biggest battleship. Kex-Thul felt a flutter of hope. 12 large ships might actually make a difference against the Vexcar. Show me. The main viewing screen activated, displaying the space near Centauri Prime. Kex-Thul could see the human vessels clearly now. They were crude-looking things made of metal and ceramic instead of the elegant biomaterials most civilized species used. But they were indeed large, bristling with weapon systems that looked primitive but dangerous. Have they made contact? Kex-Thul asked. Double quotes. Yes, Ambassador. Captain Morrison of the human vessel Liberty requests permission to meet with you immediately. Grant it, Kex-Thul said. Perhaps these humans could help after all. 12 large ships was more than he had dared to hope for. What Kex-Thul didn't know was that Captain Morrison's 12 ships were just the advance guard. The real fleet was still hidden behind a moon, waiting. Captain Jake Morrison materialized in the Centauri Council chamber using their transportation technology. He was a tall man with graying hair and steady eyes. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate robes of the Centauri officials, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. Ambassador Kex-Thul, Morrison said, with a respectful nod. Thank you for allowing me to come aboard. Kex-Thul studied the human carefully. Morrison didn't look like a savage. He seemed intelligent and professional. Perhaps the stories about human brutality were exaggerated. Captain Morrison, Kex-Thul replied, we are grateful for your response to our request. How quickly can your 12 ships be ready for combat? Morrison raised an eyebrow. 12 ships? Your fleet, Kex-Thul said, gesturing toward the viewing screen showing Morrison's battle group. Our sensors detected 12 vessels. Ambassador, Morrison said slowly, those aren't my fleet. Those are my scouts. Before Kex-Thul could ask what that meant, alarms began sounding throughout the Centauri station. The aide who had announced Morrison's arrival was back at his sensor station, staring at readings that made no sense. Ambassador, the aide called, out in a shaking voice. I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching our position. Vexcar? Kex-Thul asked, feeling panic rise in his chest. No, sir, human signatures. Hundreds of them. The viewing screen shifted to show the space around Centauri Prime. As Kex-Thul watched in growing amazement, human ships began appearing out of hyperspace. First dozens, then hundreds. They kept coming in organized waves, each group taking precise positions around the planet. Dear ancestors, whispered Counselor Zexinen. How many ships do they have? Morrison checked a small device on his wrist. Admiral Carter's main battle group is 843 vessels, plus support ships, medical vessels, supply ships, and the Special Operations Fleet. Special Operations Fleet? Kex-Thul asked weakly. The ships carrying Dr. Price's biological weapons, Morrison explained casually. We figured standard weapons might not be enough against a hive mind species. Kex-Thul's legs gave out. He sank into his chair, staring at the screen as more human ships continued to arrive. The space around Centauri Prime was filling with vessels unlike anything he had ever seen. Some were massive dreadnoughts with weapons that could crack planets. Others were sleek destroyers that seemed to flicker in and out of visibility. Still others were strange, angular ships that hurt to look at directly. You said this was a minor border dispute, Morrison said quietly. But I've been fighting on the Rim for 10 years, Ambassador. I know what desperate people sound like. You're not dealing with raiders or pirates. You're facing extinction. The Vexcar, Kex-Thul admitted. They've consumed 6 of our worlds. Our fleets can't stop them. Nothing can stop them. Everything can be stopped, Morrison replied. You just need to know how. On the bridge of the dreadnought Titan's Hammer, Admiral Lisa Carter watched her fleet take positions around Centauri Prime. Each ship knew its role. Each captain understood the mission. This wasn't just a rescue operation. This was a demonstration of what human military doctrine really meant. "Admiral," reported Commander Pete Sullivan from the tactical station. "All ships are in position. Dr. Price's biological warfare vessels are standing by. Long-range sensors are tracking 17 Vexcar hive ships approaching the system." 17? Carter asked. "Intelligence said there might be 5 or 6. The Vexcar have been massing their forces," Sullivan explained. "It looks like they're planning a final assault on the Centauri capital." Carter nodded. "Perfect. We'll get them all at once. Signal the fleet." Operation Cleansing Fire is now active. The Vexcar hive ships were massive organic vessels that looked more like living creatures than spacecraft. Each one contained millions of individual Vexcar organisms working as a single mind. They had consumed the resources of 6 worlds to build this fleet. They were confident that nothing could stop them. They had never fought humans before. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Vexcar scouts encountered human picket ships on the edge of the system. The scouts expected to brush aside a few primitive vessels and continue their advance. Instead, they ran into a wall of kinetic projectiles and nuclear explosives. Human weapons were different from what other species used. Most civilized races had developed clean energy weapons that were precise and efficient. Humans still used projectiles that punched through shields and nuclear warheads that didn't care about energy defenses. The Vexcar scouts were torn apart. Before they could send a warning, the main Vexcar fleet continued its approach, unaware that their scouts had been destroyed. The hive mind was focused on the feast ahead. Centauri Prime had billions of inhabitants. Their consumption would fuel the creation of hundreds more hive ships. "Vexcar fleet entering weapons range," Sullivan reported. "All ships," Carter broadcast. On the fleet channel, "This is Admiral Carter. The target is complete elimination. No Vexcar vessel leaves this system. No Vexcar organism survives. We're not here to drive them off. We're here to end them." The human fleet opened fire as one. 800 ships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. The space between the fleets filled with projectiles, missiles, energy beams, and nuclear fire. The Vexcar had never experienced anything like it. Other species fought space battles like chess matches. They maneuvered carefully, exchanged precise shots, and tried to disable rather than destroy. Humans fought like they were trying to tear the universe apart. On the Centauri station, Ambassador Kex Thul watched the battle in stunned silence. The viewing screen showed the human fleet engaging the Vexcar with a violence that defied belief. Human ships didn't just shoot at the enemy. They swarmed them, surrounded them, and pounded them with more firepower than should be possible. "This is not how civilized species conduct warfare," Zexinen whispered. Captain Morrison, still standing beside them, heard the comment. "No," he agreed. "This is how humans conduct warfare. We don't fight to win points or claim territory. We fight to make sure the threat never comes back." A Vexcar hive ship broke through the human line and tried to flee. 3 human destroyers pursued it, their sleek hulls glowing with the heat of their engines. The Vexcar ship was faster, but the humans didn't give up. They chased it to the edge of the system and destroyed it with nuclear torpedoes. "They're hunting them," Kex Thul realized. "The humans aren't just defeating the Vexcar. They're hunting them down like animals." "Like threats," Morrison corrected. "Every Vexcar that escapes will grow into another hive ship eventually. We learned a long time ago that some enemies don't deserve mercy." The battle raged for 6 hours. When it was over, 17 Vexcar hive ships had been reduced to floating debris. Not a single Vexcar organism had escaped. The human fleet had taken minimal losses, 3 ships damaged, none destroyed. As Kex Thul watched the human ships regrouping after their victory, He began to understand what his people had really done. When they called for help, they hadn't contacted a small, primitive species asking for assistance. They had awakened something that had been waiting patiently at the edge of galactic civilization. They had called the apex predators, and the apex predators had answered. The Vexcar breeding world of Scarthik had been a beautiful garden planet before the swarm arrived. Now it pulsed with sickly green light as massive organic structures covered its surface. Inside those structures, millions of Vexcar organisms were being born every hour, ready to join the endless hunger of the hive mind. Colonel Sam Bennett crouched behind a fallen piece of alien architecture, checking his rifle one more time. Around him, 200 human Marines prepared for what every other species would consider suicide. They were going to walk into a Vexcar breeding ground and destroy it from the inside. "Remember," Bennett spoke into his comm unit, "these things are fast and they're smart, but they've never fought anything like us before. We're not here to be heroes. We're here to do a job." His Marines nodded. They wore heavy armor that could withstand acid and biological attacks. Their weapons were designed specifically for close combat against organic targets. Each soldier carried enough firepower to level a small building dot above them. Dr. Helen Price's biological warfare ships released their payload into the planet's atmosphere. The virus she had created would take days to spread through the Vexcar population, but the breeding grounds needed to be destroyed immediately to prevent more swarm ships from launching. "Drop ships incoming," called Sergeant Lisa Murphy from her position. 30 seconds to insertion. The human ships descended through clouds of toxic spores that the Vexcar used to defend their world. The spores would have killed any other species. Instantly, human soldiers had been modified with biofilters and chemical resistance treatments. They walked through poison like it was morning air. Bennett's team hit the ground running. The landscape around them was nightmare fuel, pulsing walls of flesh, streams of organic matter flowing between structures, and the constant sound of millions of creatures being born. The air itself seemed alive with hostile intent. "Targets ahead," Murphy reported. 12 worker cast, moving to intercept. The Vexcar workers were the size of small vehicles, with multiple arms ending in razor-sharp claws. They moved with perfect coordination, each one knowing what the others were thinking. They had been designed to overwhelm enemies with speed and numbers. They had never faced human Marines before. Bennett's team opened fire with weapons that fired explosive rounds designed to disrupt organic tissue. The Vexcar workers dissolved under the barrage, their acid blood splattering harmlessly against human armor. The Marines advanced without slowing down. "Breeding chamber ahead," called Private Tony Garcia from the point position. "It's huge." The chamber was a cathedral of flesh and bone, stretching up into the toxic sky. Inside it, Bennett could see thousands of Vexcar larvae growing in organic pods. Each one would become a warrior or worker in the endless swarm. Each one had to die. "Plant the charges," Bennett ordered. "We've got 10 minutes before this place comes down." His Marines spread out through the chamber, placing explosive devices at key structural points. The charges were nuclear-based, designed to burn hot enough to completely sterilize the area. Nothing would survive, not even genetic material. As they worked, more Vexcar began arriving. Warriors this time, bigger and more dangerous than the workers. They moved like liquid death, their claws capable of cutting through most materials. But human armor was made from compressed metals that had been tested against every known weapon. The Vexcar claws sparked and scraped but couldn't penetrate. "Garcia, Murphy, cover the exit," Bennett ordered as he armed the final charge. "Everyone else, time to leave." The Marines fought their way out of the breeding chamber as it began to collapse behind them. Explosive charges detonated in sequence, bringing down structures that had taken the Vexcar months to grow. Nuclear fire spread through the organic Matrix, turning everything it touched into ash. Extraction point in sight, Murphy reported. Drop ships are waiting. As Bennett's team reached their extraction point, similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human forces had located every Vexcar breeding ground, every supply depot, every staging area. They weren't just fighting the swarm, they were dismantling it piece by piece. In space, Admiral Carter's fleet continued its systematic destruction of Vexcar forces. Her ships had spread across 17 star systems, hunting down every hive ship they could find. The aliens in the Galactic Council watched in amazement as humans demonstrated what total war really meant. On the bridge of the Titan's Hammer, Carter studied reports from across the combat zone. Her fleet had destroyed over 300 Vexcar vessels in the past week. More importantly, Dr. Price's biological weapon was working exactly as designed. "Admiral," reported Commander Pete Sullivan, "we're receiving status updates from the ground teams. All breeding worlds have been sterilized. The biological weapon has achieved 90% penetration of the remaining Vexcar population." "Excellent," Carter replied. "What about the deep space hives?" "Captain Morrison's hunter groups have located and destroyed 47 mobile breeding facilities. Long-range sensors show no remaining Vexcar signatures in our search area." Carter nodded with satisfaction. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. Other species fought wars to achieve victory. Humans fought wars to achieve extinction of the threat. Dr. Helen Price worked in her mobile laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery. Around her, screens displayed real-time data on how her virus was spreading through the Vexcar population. The results were better than she had hoped. "The virus has reached critical mass," she reported to Admiral Carter over the communication link. "The Vexcar hive mind is breaking down. Individual organisms are beginning to act independently, which is causing massive coordination failures." "How long until complete breakdown?" Carter asked. 48 hours at most," Price replied. "After that, any surviving Vexcar will be individual animals, not part of a collective intelligence. They'll pose no threat to galactic civilization." What Price didn't mention was that there would be very few survivors. The virus was designed to be absolutely lethal to Vexcar biology. Within a week, the species that had threatened to consume the galaxy would be extinct. On Centauri Prime, Ambassador Kex Thul watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human forces were everywhere, moving with a coordination and efficiency that amazed him. They had turned the war against the Vexcar from a desperate last stand into a methodical extermination campaign. "How many Vexcar remain?" he asked his intelligence officer. "Current estimates suggest less than 5% of their original numbers," the officer replied. "And that number is dropping rapidly due to the human biological weapon." Kex Thul studied the tactical displays showing human fleet positions. They had spread across half the galaxy in just 2 weeks, tracking down every Vexcar presence they could find. No stone was being left unturned, no hiding place left unsearched. "They're not going to stop until every last one is dead," he realized. "Is that not what we wanted?" asked Counselor Zexinen. "I thought it was," Kex Thul admitted. "But watching them work, it's terrifying. They don't just fight their enemies. They erase them completely." Other species in the Galactic Council were having similar reactions. The Coven had stopped monitoring human fleet movements because the numbers were too large for their computers to track. The Nethes had recalled all their ships to home space, afraid that humans might mistake them for threats. The Velmoran had sent a formal message to Earth asking for reassurance that humans had no territorial ambitions. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching his crew track down the last known Vexcar hive ship. It was hiding in an asteroid field, trying to use the rocks for cover. The strategy might have worked against other species, but humans had experience hunting pirates in similar terrain. "Target locked," reported his weapons officer. Ready to fire. Wait, Morrison said. Scan for life pods or escape craft. If anything launches from that ship, I want it destroyed immediately. Sir, there are no life pods detected. Vexcar don't use escape systems. Then they picked the wrong species. To threaten, Morrison replied. Fire. The Liberty's main guns spoke once. The asteroid field lit up with nuclear fire as the last Vexcar hive ship was reduced to its component atoms. Morrison watched the explosion fade and felt a grim satisfaction. Another threat eliminated. Another potential genocide prevented. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out as the last remnants of the Vexcar swarm were hunted down and destroyed. What had started as a desperate call for help had become the complete elimination of a species that had threatened all life in the galaxy. The other races watched in silence as humanity demonstrated what happened when you called the apex predators. For help, they came, all of them. And they didn't stop until the job was finished. 3 weeks after the first human ships arrived in Centauri space, the war was over. The Vexcar, who had consumed 6 worlds and threatened to devour the galaxy, no longer existed. Every hive ship had been destroyed. Every breeding ground had been sterilized. Every organism carrying their genetic code had been eliminated by Dr. Price's virus. The galaxy was safe. But everything had changed. Ambassador Kex Thul stood in the ruins of what had been a Vexcar processing facility on the planet Velmara. Human engineers were already at work, using massive machines to tear down the organic structures and restore the planet's natural ecosystem. The speed and efficiency of their work was remarkable, but what struck Kex Thul most was their gentleness with the recovering environment. Amazing, he said to Captain Jake Morrison, who was walking beside him through the construction site. Your people destroy with such violence, but they rebuild with such care. Morrison nodded. That's the point. We hit threats hard so we can protect what matters. Once the danger is gone, we help things heal. They paused to watch a team of human biologists working to restore a contaminated water source. The same species that had created weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds was now carefully nursing poisoned soil back to health. I owe you an apology, Kex Thul said quietly. My people have spent years thinking of humans as violent primitives. We were wrong about everything. Were you? Morrison asked. We are violent. And compared to your technology, some of our methods are primitive. You weren't wrong about what we are. You were wrong about why we are that way. Admiral Lisa Carter stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 47 species filled the Great Chamber on Centauri Prime, 4. The first time since humans had joined the Council, every seat was occupied. Every species wanted to hear what Earth's military commander had to say. The chamber was silent as Carter approached the speaking platform. She was a small woman among beings that towered over her, but her presence filled the space. Behind her, holographic displays showed the final statistics of the Vexcar War. 0 enemy survivors. 0 human worlds lost. Mission complete. Honored representatives, Carter began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 3 weeks ago, the Centauri asked us for help with what they called a minor territorial dispute. We knew it was more than that. We always know. She gestured to the displays behind her. You've seen the numbers. 843 ships, 200,000 personnel. Weapons that some of you consider barbaric. A response that seemed overwhelming for a simple request for assistance. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many of the representatives had been questioning human methods since the war began. I want to explain why we responded the way we did, Carter continued. On Earth, we have a saying. When someone asks for help, you don't send what you think is enough, you send everything you have. Because if they're desperate enough to ask, the situation is worse than they're admitting. Ambassador Kexthul, sitting in the front row, felt his face flush with embarrassment. She was right, of course. The Zentari had understated the crisis because they were too proud to admit how badly they needed help. The Vexcar were an extinction level threat, Carter said. Not just to the Zentari, but to all organic life in this galaxy. They couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or contained. They had to be eliminated completely. That's not cruelty. That's responsibility. Council Prime Veltar, the ancient leader of the Assembly, spoke from his elevated platform. Admiral Carter, many species are concerned about human military capabilities. Your response was far beyond what anyone expected. How can we be sure that such power won't be turned against peaceful worlds? Carter was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Prime Veltar, let me ask you something. In the 3 weeks since this war began, how many human ships have entered your territory without permission? How many of your worlds have we claimed? As spoils of war? How many of your people have we demanded tribute from? None, Veltar admitted. We had over 800 ships in space and complete military dominance. Carter continued. If we wanted to conquer the galaxy, this would have been the perfect time. Instead, we're already sending our fleets home. We're helping rebuild the worlds the Vexcar damaged. And we're asking for nothing in return except the knowledge that the threat has been eliminated. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. That's what humans are. When you're in danger, we'll come running with everything we have. When the danger is over, we go home and tend our own gardens. Representative Nixval of the Corvin Alliance stood to speak. But Admiral, your methods of warfare shocked many of us. The biological weapons, the nuclear explosives, the systematic hunting of fleeing enemies. How do we reconcile this with the peaceful species we thought we knew? Carter's expression hardened slightly. Representative Nixval, how many Corvan worlds did the Vexcar consume before we arrived? 3, Nixval admitted quietly. How many have they consumed since we began fighting them? None. That's how you reconcile it, Carter said firmly. We use violent methods because they work. We hunt fleeing enemies because letting them escape means they'll be back. We employ biological weapons because sometimes total elimination is the only solution. We do terrible things so that good people can sleep safely. Dr. Helen Price sat in the gallery, watching the proceedings with mixed feelings. Her virus had worked perfectly, eliminating the Vexcar threat completely. But the other species looked at her like she was a monster. Perhaps she was. Perhaps that was necessary. Dr. Price, Council Prime Veltar called out. Would you explain your biological weapon to the Assembly? Price stood and walked to the speaking platform. She had been dreading this moment. The virus I created was designed to be absolutely lethal to Vexcar biology. It spreads through their hive-mind connection and corrupts their ability to process organic matter. Death is inevitable once infected. And you feel no remorse for creating such a weapon? Asked Representative Kelthan of the Nethys Cooperative. I feel remorse for needing to create it, Price replied, but not for using it. The Vexcar were a cancer in the galaxy. Sometimes you have to use poison to kill cancer. What if this weapon falls into the wrong hands? Kelthan pressed. What if it's modified to target other species? It can't be, Price said simply. The virus was engineered specifically for Vexcar DNA. It's completely harmless to any other known life form. I made sure of that. Captain Morrison stood in the observation deck above the main chamber, watching the debate below. Beside him, Colonel Bennett and several other human officers listened to their leaders explain human military philosophy to a galaxy that was struggling to understand it. Think they'll ever really get it? Bennett asked. Some will, Morrison replied. The smart ones already do. Look at Kexthul down there. He understands now that we're not the monsters he thought we were. We're the monsters that hunt other monsters. And the ones who don't get it, Morrison shrugged. They'll learn. Or they'll stay afraid of us. Either way, they'll be safe. That's what matters. Admiral Carter was finishing her speech to the Council. We know what we are, she said. We're the species that other species call when the universe gets too dark and too dangerous. We're the ones who do what needs to be done, no matter how ugly it gets. And we're the ones who make sure that when the morning comes, there's still something left worth protecting. She gestured to the tactical displays one more time. The Vex car are gone. All of them. They will never threaten anyone again. That's what you get when you call the humans for help. Complete solutions to complete problems. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives debated among themselves. Some were horrified by human methods. Others were grateful beyond words. All of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever. As the formal session ended, Ambassador Kex approached Admiral Carter. Admiral, on behalf of the Zenturi people, I want to offer our formal alliance. Full military cooperation, shared technology, open borders. Carter smiled. That's very generous, Ambassador. But we don't need payment for doing what's right. It's not payment, Kex replied. It's recognition. You saved us all, and we want to make sure that if you ever need help, we'll be there for you. Even knowing what we're capable of? Especially knowing what you're capable of, Kex said firmly. The galaxy is a dangerous place. It's good to know the most dangerous predators are on our side. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, human ships across the galaxy were already beginning their journey home. The immediate threat was over, but everyone understood that this was just the beginning. Humanity had revealed itself as the galaxy's ultimate guardians. When the next crisis came, everyone would know who to call, and the humans would answer. All of them.